Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Badab War. Now this is part 6, maybe 7 or 8. If you have not checked out the other parts, please click on the link below. That's going to take you to the playlist, and you can learn about this awesome war there. Or simply click on the link in the description below. That would take you to the wiki page where you could read this information for yourself. With that said, let's get into 40 facts about the Badab War. Taking advantage of the anarchy that reigned within the Maelstrom Zone, it was unsurprising that attacks from unaligned raiding forces and Xeno races based within the turbulence expanse of the Maelstrom Zone dramatically increased, reaching a new height during the year 907 of the 41st millennium. The secessionists suffered the worst at the hands of these non-aligned forces during the Badab War. A large orc corsair fleet spilled forth from the Kala system, assaulting secessionist supply convoys between the Edimon cluster and the Badab sector, and ultimately assaulted the Mantis warriors at Edimon itself. A large force of over 20,000 boys proceeded to slaughter the planet's meager garrison, forcing the Mantis warriors to pull back to defend Edimon and meet the orcs in a rapid-moving land battle on the dusk plains of Orila, lest they lose their world. As serious as the orc attack against the cluster was, there was far more worse implications of the growing threat of the demon-tainted corsair cults based on the blighted world of Magog. Their increase in power had actually driven forth the recently defeated orcs. This forced the secessionists to launch a direct assault on the hellish world, which despite a prior Exterminatus campaign, had long remained a thorn in the Maelstrom warder's side. Corian Sumartis, one of Huron's most seasoned battle captains, commanded an Astroclaws battle barge and conducted the attack on the planet. A force of 2 companies of the chapter and a strong force of hand-picked Astroclaws and Lamentor's Terminators successfully cut off the threat while it was still forming. The tyrant knew well they could ill afford the risk of fighting a war on 2 fronts if they continued to allow this dire threat on Magog to continue. Though a costly diversion that caused a high number of fatalities, the secessionists were able to reinforce their flanks just as new enemies entered the conflict. The powerful fleet-based chapter of Dark Renown, the Minotaurs, arrived in full strength in the Maelstrom Zone in the mid-907th year of the 41st millennium. They announced their presence in the war by launching a full chapter-scale assault on the secessionist-controlled mining facility on Cairo, wiping out 46,000-strong Tyrant's Legion garrison and rendering the mine works unusable. Afterwards, the Minotaurs sent a ship with a representative and officially presented themselves to the Loyalist Council of War. Their master, the darkly famed Asterion Moloch, remained with his chapter to raid through the Pale Star region in order to decimate rather than conquer a pre-planned list of resource production within the region in order to starve the secessionist war effort. While the Minotaur chapter ceded over strategic authority to the War Council of the Loyalist chapters already engaged in the conflict, they deliberately stayed largely aloof and distant from its general chain of command, distancing themselves from the other chapters, as was their wont, and deferring to the Legate Inquisitor's authority more often than the Lord High Commander, Carib Coln, or his advisors. This distance was shown in their standing representative to the War Council, the gaunt, brooding, and taciturn chaplain Ivanus Enkomai, whose red-rimmed eyes observed all, although he barely spoke a word during the gatherings. The Minotaur's chapter master, Moloch, never put in a personal appearance at this council, and the only evidence that he served during the Badab conflict at all came from the picked footage recovered from battle scans and fearful stories spreading by few secessionist survivors of the Minotaurs' brutal attacks. The Minotaurs had come in answer to the direct summons from acting Legate Inquisitor for more Space Marines to join the Loyalist cause against the secessionist chapter, though the arrival of this savage chapter was cautiously welcomed by the Loyalists. They undoubtedly couldn't deny the considerable strength that would be added to the Imperium's cause. The conflict was in its 4th year of open warfare, and the Minotaurs committed their entire strength to the war. 10 companies and 11 capital ships of various types. While the chapter coordinated their efforts with the Loyalist command, they operated largely independent throughout the conflict, striking targets as they saw fit. The Minotaurs attacked indiscriminately, attacking not only the 30-plus secessionist-controlled minor worlds and stations, but also overlooked independent minor outposts. Operating largely independently in the southern Maelstrom Zone, the Minotaurs proceeded to strike targets amid the Pale Stars and Dene Stellar Drift border region. The viciousness of the chapter's reputation for leaving no survivors among those that resisted them quickly grew, and remained uncontested until the arrival of the even more savage Carcharodon's chapter. It's about to get real. Only the warships and strike forces of the Executioners seemed to be able to halt the Minotaurs' progress within the region, the two chapters seemingly relishing the battle between them as a kind of bloody sport. For the remainder of the year, the Minotaurs gained several important victories for the Loyalist cause, destroying the Tyrant Legion's forces on Krau's world and Larsa, and forced the Astroclaws to withdraw or risk having their worlds isolated and ravaged one by one. Within 1/3 of a standard year of the Minotaurs arriving in the region, the direct and collateral damage caused by their forces reduced the human population of the Pale Stars by more than 20%. The power of their chapter quickly proved a decisive weight in the Loyalist favor, regardless of its brutal methods. By the end of the 907th year of the 41st millennia, the secessionists had been able to be pushed back from several key systems and suffer several losses. In the northern central Maelstrom Zone, the battle for Galen between the Astroclaws and a joint force of Salamanders and Fire Angels eventually resulted in the Loyalists successfully taking the system. To further add to the secessionists' dreadful losses was the loss of Viania, which finally fell after a massive joint assault by the Minotaurs and Red Scorpions chapter. Huron had all but abandoned the world, and the sizable Tyrant's Legion garrison stationed there. As the Angels of Death fell amongst the beleaguered defenders, their end was swift and brutal, and by dawn, Viania was in the Loyalist hands, as the Tyrant's Legion was put to the sword. In the early 908th year of the 41st millennium, Inquisitorial agents had acquired evidence of a plot between the Astroclaws and renegade heretic scavengers from the Golgothan wastes. They had devised a plan to acquire recovered buried weapons stored on the dead world of Signax. The Sons of Medusa task force, backed by a newly arrived company from the Exorcist chapter, were given this task. Given the chief role in this task, the Sons of Medusa led the determined and brutal campaign to scour out the Tyrant's forces, the conduct of which caused some discord between the two chapters, with accusations that the Sons of Medusa were more interested in pursuing their own mysterious agenda instead of hunting down the enemy as expeditiously as possible. The Exorcists soon withdrew and redeployed their forces for the forthcoming assault on the Sagan system, leaving the Sons of Medusa to eliminate the Synax threat as they saw fit. The Second Battle of Sagan was a major planetary assault undertaken in the year 908 of the 41st millennium. It drove the secessionists from their fortress in the Sagan subsector. The assault was carried out by the largest combined Loyalist force fielded to the point during the Badab War. This offensive utilized the mass strength of the Fire Angels, Red Scorpions, and the Exorcist chapter, supported by assaulted specialized forces drawn from the Salamanders, Raptors, and Nova Marines. The secessionists chose to mount a defense at any cost rather than give up the strategically vital Sagan system. The fighting proved to be bloody and costly in the extreme. In a desperate attempt to either drive the Loyalists from the surface of Sagan III or render the planet unusable to them, the Astroclaws resorted to the use of viral weapons that slew tens of thousands on the world's populations. This use of weapons of mass destruction ultimately destroyed a sizable component of the secessionist-owned battle lines. The Fire Angels deployed their full chapter strength and bore the brunt of the Loyalist casualties, valiantly sacrificing themselves in order to contain the Astroclaws' desperate final attempt to drive their foes from the world through the utilization of suicide attacks. This campaign resulted in the highest death toll of any single engagement of the war to this point, as well as the loss of several key secessionist warships in a vain counterattack on the system. The successful invasion of the Sagan system proved to be a major turning point of the war. After the system fell under the Loyalist control, it became the primary Imperial base in the Maelstrom Zone, affording the Loyalist offensive greater access to the primary stable warp routes into the region, while denying those routes to the enemy. Shortly afterward, at the end of the campaign, Sagan III was used as a supply point in order to fully relieve and reinforce Cerngrad and support the start of the Edimon suppression campaign. This Loyalist advance effectively forced the remaining Mantis Warrior forces into a purely defensive posture, isolating them from the Badab sector and their secessionist allies. After the Second Battle of Sagan, the Maelstrom Zone was effectively split into two regions, the Edimon cluster and the still heavily defended Badab sector itself. From this point onward in the conflict, the secessionists were able to conduct commerce raids and targeted strikes, which were carried out by the vessels of the Executioners and Lamenters Chapter's fleet. And those were 40 facts about the Badab War. We're not done. We got more story to come, so please subscribe to the channel to get part 7, I think it is, or 8. We're going to talk more about orcs. Everybody loves orcs. There's a huge war going on that's coming forth after all these events, so please subscribe to the channel to get that video. Again, guys, thank you so much for liking, commenting, and sharing. Because of you, we can continue to post videos. And again, if you are tired of my voice, simply click on the link below. That's going to take you to the wiki page where you can read all this awesome information there. Again, guys, thank you for everything, and I'll see you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.